remembered the line from the Hindu scripture, the Bhagavad Gita. Persuade the prince that he should do his duty, and to impress him takes on his multi-armed form and says, "Now I am become death, the destroyer of worlds." I suppose we all thought that one way or another.
That was J. Robert Oppenheimer. That is the famous Oppenheimer clip, and shows the theoretical physicist and one of the few men that's credited as the father of the atomic bomb for his research in the Manhattan Project, the nuclear research done in World War II that, of course, result in the 2 atomic bombs that were dropped on Hiroshima and Nagasaki. Much like Oppenheimer, the Man in Black would find himself among the creators at first and trying to save lives, or in the Man in Black's case, just one life in particular, but obviously science that could be used to save multiple. But nonetheless, the Man in Black, just like Oppenheimer, connecting more with the role of death than the role of creator, and with Dolores' looming reference to the Man in Black's creation being turned into a weapon by the end of this. Both men, certainly Oppenheimer, from all we're led to believe, have much pain over the actions of his past. We're yet to see how far Westworld is going to take the seemingly change of hats for the Man in Black, and that's what this video will be diving into. But we know that Oppenheimer definitely carried it to the end of his life. So is the Man in Black redeemable, or is he even looking for redemption, or simply to actually embrace the role of death in a much more literal way?
You know the true thing in all your life. You think you know death, but you don't. You didn't recognize him sitting across from you this whole time.
Before we jump into it, I'd like to thank Michael R. Palmer, a bright subscriber who brought this similarity to my attention. Thank you, Michael. All right, everybody, The Riddle of the Sphinx, episode 4 of season 2, moved the series to bigger, better themes. Themes appropriate and worthy of Westworld. The past episodes have been great, don't get me wrong, and I've enjoyed them. But now that the hosts are capable of making their own decisions, I would like to get past some of the cognitive failures leading to mashed up storylines featuring cool, yes, Delos Beach QA tech and data mining, and move on to, or even dare I say backwards to where we began, at exploring creation, death, and the men who believe these forces can be reshaped. I do want to mention that this was co-creator Lisa Joy's directorial debut, and she definitely didn't pull any punches. She did an amazing job. The opening scene that introduces us to what I'm going to describe as the James Delos Project is fantastic. So don't play with me, 'cause you're the scene's cinematography, intention to set design make witnessing James Delos play out his morning routine to the circulating vinyl Rolling Stones record jamming out Play with Fire is a great immersive experience, with everything from the furniture to the shape of the room is circular, symbolic of the host's narrative loops, and enhanced by a circular camera motion that turns this somehow futuristic, retro, sterile space work on a whole new level that feels a little 2001 A Space Odyssey, and at least just to me, a little Pulp Fiction, especially for the chain-smoking, hard-drinking, post-death host copy of James Delos residing in a laboratory under observation. And credit to where my Westworld After Show co-host Hax Dogma perfectly put, he is much like the goldfish in the environment that has been designed around him. He is showing all the signs of being a host, and a very unstable one at that, with his Bernard-like handshaking and glassy-eyed gazing into the mirror in almost a catatonic stupor. When William pays him a visit, we get confirmation that this isn't the real James Delos, but a human-host hybrid that's still under development. Delos had a terminal disease, the research for which he evidently defunded 14 years back, and his consciousness has been ported over to a synthetic frame, but we now get confirmation of these signs through a series of brilliant scenes well acted by both men, both Jimmy Simpson and Peter Mullen. Jimmy Simpson nails the transformation from optimistic to frustrated to accompanied by even a visible sadness that Delos is not ready for the outside world. He breaks down into a stumbling, trembling mess that William refers to later as a cognitive plateau, a point where his development stops. You see, what William is checking for in these interviews is what they refer to as fidelity, pretty much consistency. The idea would be that James Delos would have the same conversation as the host, James Delos. He finds this ridiculous until hands him a verbatim script in the first interview that we see, with a smile on his face, very optimistic. A William that changes throughout the episode and gives us a much more fleshed out William, one that is actually a little bit more understandable, at least more selfless than selfish motivations for his actions. They still don't clear him or absolve him of any of his horrible deeds, but they definitely make him a empathetic character. This is shown through these brilliant scenes that I'm speaking of and showing on the screen right now. We engage the progress of Delos by the increase in age in William. He goes from a young William, played by Jimmy Simpson, eventually to the Man in Black, making the full transformation, or at least better than the transformation that was only given to us through some exposition over a campfire that we saw in the previously on segment of the episode. The second time we see William meet with James Delos, we see that the actor Jimmy Simpson has a little bit of a scruff to him and a gray around his beard, a subtle but convincing aging process. We can tell it's been a while. Eventually, then we make the harsh turn to the Man in Black, but still softens the turn as a whole and makes it less of a quantum leap like we did in the first season from the young newcomer William to the Man in Black. And it makes us look at William in a totally different light. It also makes us look at not if host can be human, but if human can be host. What this show is trying to really ask us overall, the bigger picture here and the philosophy behind it, which philosophy is always huge in Westworld, and it's even bigger in this episode when you have the title being the Riddle of the Sphinx. And we'll kick it over really quick to a quick explanation without wasting too much time of that and how that connects to the show, because essentially the question is, what makes us human? Let's just take a quick simplistic look at the Riddle of the Sphinx, a story from one of the 3 plays that are known as the 3 Theban plays that Sophocles put together. Epictetus always represents 2 enduring themes of Greek myth and drama: the flawed nature of humanity and the individual's role in the course of destiny in a harsh universe. And one of the main themes is, how do you beat fate? How do you overcome predetermination? Epictetus becomes the mythical king of Thebes, but before he does that, Epictetus encounters a Sphinx, who would stop all travelers to Thebes and ask them a riddle. If the travelers were unable to answer her correct, they would be killed. If they're successful, they're free to continue their journey. The riddle was, what walks on 4 feet in the morning, 2 in the afternoon, and 3 at night? Epictetus answered, man. An infant crawls on all 4s. An adult walks on 2 legs. In an old age, they use a walking stick, thus the 3 legs. Bested at last, the Sphinx then threw herself onto a high rock and died. Or she ate herself. It depends on how you interpret it. It's pretty dark, kind of drastic, but the Riddle of Sphinx and Westworld both pose the same question, essentially. What does it mean to be human? Aristotle says Epictetus is a great man ruined by great error. This is a common theme, but Epictetus is a little deeper than this. Just like Westworld, it is suggested that it could be bliss for Epictetus not to learn certain things in these stories, but yet he still goes out and seeks out information, even when it's not advantageous for him himself. Sophocles focus on the choices that Epictetus freely makes. In Greek myth, the characters usually don't escape their fate, but Epictetus still seeks out information and tries to make his own choices in his own way in his world, even if it is all predetermined. The gods know the score of the game before it's even played, but he still tries to play it his way. Epictetus can be applied to almost all the characters in Westworld, but especially after this episode, you really have to look at the Man in Black as a main contender for the character. So in this episode, that the James Delos and William scenes are almost a mix of Groundhog's Day, 51st Dates, and Requiem for a Dream, which is probably not a perfect analogy, and it's definitely not a perfect or pleasant experience for either side, except for the viewers. Us, of course, I enjoyed these scenes immensely. Now we see why Season 1 Man in Black is so intent on bringing the hosts out of their loops. He's not trying to simply recreate the moment with Dolores for his own simple pleasure. He's become obsessed, expert gamer of the park, to use any cruel methods at his disposal to coax out a semblance of true emotion. He's almost trying to reverse engineer a host's mind, since just like the audience, we're seeing this narrative framed in a light that we now moved from wondering if the host can be more like us and forced to try to legitimize the hosts, even if they're unable to overcome what I believe Westworld as a story is trying to get us past, or at least what make you consider the fact that we're biologically embedded to be biased against anything that doesn't exhibit the traits of the sentient being, a concept we ourselves named and claimed. As Dr. Ford has stated, the human intellect was like peacock feathers. It's a extravagant display intended to attract a mate. all of art, literature, a bit of Mozart, William Shakespeare, Michelangelo in the Empire State Building. Just an elaborate mating ritual. Maybe it doesn't matter if we've accomplished so much for the basest reasons. The peacock can barely fly, it lives in the dirt, pecking insects out of the muck, consoling itself with its great beauty, going as far as to even claim consciousness isn't real. There's nothing that makes us special, but whether or not you choose to believe humans are by divine right or anything else deserving of this #1 spot on this short list of whose thoughts and feelings matter, are real or organic, the James Delos experiment flips our narrative. Even if we have all of our own memories, we're able to form new ones. Is it possible for us to live on through these beings? We have to legitimize the host to legitimize the human. It seems that James Delos, who taps out at day 35, his best go at it is 35 days, and it seems that what drives him mad is not only the finding out of his family and all those around him being dead, but when he's faced with the facts about his own situation is when he cannot cope. He doesn't recognize himself in the mirror. He cannot accept his own humanity. He rejects his own humanity. In the theory that joy can be ignored, but we have to acknowledge pain. As soon as the man in black walks through the door, it's reasonable to conclude that we witness the 30-some-year time span in between William, white hat, newcomer to the park, with his less than ideal brother-in-law Logan, who gradually turns into a black hat, who murdered his way to the center of Ford's Maze, but we didn't see his transformation. We made that giant leap from one to another without anything really to justify him walking through that door. But the glimpse of his relationship with his daughter, which is furthermore enhanced by merging his worlds completely with great amount of fan service via confirmation of Grace equals Emily theory, is equally intriguing. His motives for keeping his father-in-law alive as a host are unclear, but there's a sharp difference between how he sees the project in the first scene together and how he does in the last one. And by this time, both Logan and Juliet, Jim's children, have died unnaturally, his daughter taking her own life due to William's behavior, and Logan evidently succumbs to a overdose, which I guess isn't too hard to believe. All the family that William essentially has in his mind is this hybrid form that never really worked and doesn't deserve to work. He states, "I'm beginning to think this whole enterprise was a mistake. People aren't meant to live forever." But there's more to it than this. He doesn't want to abandon the project straight away. He wants this host version of his father-in-law to suffer. The world is better off without you, he says, possibly without me. We now have a game with meaning and have to consider where Ford stood on all this, if he wants to really help the man in black or if he's just toying with him. But whatever game he's playing, he isn't the only competitor. All the hosts seem to be entering this game. Emily, aka Grace, seems to have every intention of getting something out of this park, and it seems like it isn't just to meet up with her father. She has a notebook full of clues and just is likely to be an adversary rather than a companion. I don't see a father-daughter slaughter. I also don't see a father-daughter bonding session either. So what do you guys think about the James Delos experiment, and what do you think this tells us about the man in black? We see him in these scenes with Craddock obviously mirroring himself and his actions in season 1 with how he treated Lawrence's family and the abuse he put the host through, and we see him embrace the death aspect as we spoke about at the beginning. But do we believe that he has truly changed, or this puts any justification to what he's done so far, or changes the way that you look at him? What do you think of Dr. Ford and how he plays into this, and who the copy of the host is? Some have taken now, it is worth to mention, that the sudden PTSD, which I took note of in the after show live stream before the dust settles, that I think it, as a story, they should have dropped a few of these scenes of just a hand shaking and bathtubs filled with water and blood. Evidently the overdose that he never personally witnessed of his wife are coming through as almost his cornerstone, but I think that we are getting the idea that he might be a host form, is a theory going around that this is a host form of the Man in Black routine, and he is the copy that Dr. Ford ordered. I do tend to believe that this is, unfortunately, even though I love the show, this is just a flaw in the storytelling, a flaw in our narrative, our actual narrative. They chose to do the turn and show us a true side of the Man in Black, so we are privy to information that we weren't in the story, but it does not constitute his behavior just changing because we're aware of it. These actions had always been taking place, so he should have been probably experiencing these traumatic experiences when he was abusing the hosts before this episode. But Craddock is a perfect mirroring of the Man in Black, and it was beautifully done. I'm Justin Thomas. I'd like to thank all my Patreons and make making content just that much easier by supporting me. If you're interested in supporting this channel and supporting creativity, please go to the links below and make sure to subscribe if you haven't by now, and look forward to our videos coming out in the future. And always, after the show, we do a live stream. Me, Hax Dogma, and guest host Debbie Santa will be on again this Sunday at 10:30 to give you our initial thoughts, whether they're pretty or not. Thank you guys so much, and I will see you soon.